Not hearing any, thank you. Next is going to be approval of the November 20th, 2025 meeting minutes. Anybody have any issues with those?
The only ones that I saw on the last page, there's 3 different places where it says vote aye by roll call vote. Should it be voted aye or, oh, just,
All present voted, yeah.
there's 3 of them there.
I'll get them fixed.
Anything else from anybody? Have a motion to approve the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, the motion would be with those edits suggested by Commissioner Coleman.
Thank you very much. That's why she's right here beside me.
Keeps you in mind.
Okay, motion for the approve with the edits to change the ayes and
Voted.
The vote to voted.
or voted, yeah, okay. Works for me. Okay, do we have a motion?
So move with the edits.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Howard. Then second.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Venner. We have a first and we have a second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, let's take vote.
Coleman,
Yes.
Eklund,
Yes.
Howard,
Yes.
Johnson,
yes,
Venner,
Yes.
Huggins.
Yes. So the minutes are approved. Do we have any public input? First, here in the room, anybody that wants to say anything? Anybody on the phone?
yes, this is Dale Kniff of South Dakota Pilot Association.
And I don't think I know who you are.
No, am I supposed to go or do we want the ones on the phone?
Well, we always sit around the room, so we'll let you go first.
Okay, all right. Good afternoon, my name is Christy Turman. I am here testifying today on behalf of myself and my family. My comments are my own. I want to tell you a couple stories. My father's name is David Hansen. He was a decorated helicopter pilot in Vietnam. In fact, he was shot down between Khe Sanh and the Laotian border in 1969. Came home with a Purple Heart, several Bronze Stars, and several air medals. He was a pilot for the Highway Patrol and for the State Department of Transportation for a total of 20 years. On June 26, 1975, 2 FBI agents were murdered on the Pine Ridge Reservation. My dad had been flying for the Highway Patrol for about 2 years at that point. His job on that day in the HP Cessna 172 was to circle low above the Jumping Bull compound to keep the murder suspects there. Several times the Highway Patrol lieutenant flying with him said, "Dave, you have to pull up, they're shooting at us." Dad kept that airplane flying above the Jumping Bull compound for as long as he could, until he had to break off and land in Pine Ridge for fuel. Unfortunately, while the aircraft was refueling, the suspects were able to get away. My dad and I talked about that day several times. He told me it was the most frustrating day he had ever experienced in his law enforcement career. These are my dad's words on April 19th, 1993. Mayday, 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 we're going down here. I'm not sure if any of you were in South Dakota on that day or were even born yet. 8 individuals, including my dad, his fellow pilot Ron Becker and Governor Mickelson perished when the Mitsubishi aircraft they were flying experienced major parts failure and inadequate air traffic control and crashed near Zwingle, Iowa. My dad was a hell of a pilot. The pilots and mechanics the state employs today are also capable and professional, including the Highway Patrol pilot. What I want you to remember about my testimony today and about me being here with you today is this, and I say it with all the respect. Unless you've climbed into an aircraft and been shot at low altitude while doing your job, I would respectfully request that you defer to the South Dakota Highway Patrol and the research that they have conducted with other agencies with similar aircraft missions. They are best positioned to provide the experienced and expert testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments from anybody? Okay, and on the phone, I think it was Dale had something to say.
Yes. Thank you, Chairman Huggins and members of the commission. My name is Dale Knuth, and I'm president of the South Dakota Pilot Association. First off, I'd like to thank Chairman Huggins for reaching out to the South Dakota Pilot Association. We sincerely appreciate the efforts to engage stakeholders in meaningful dialogue. We are encouraged that the commission is reviewing its responsibilities and processes, and we stand ready to assist in any way that strengthens aviation safety and planning statewide. At our February 14th South Dakota Pilot Association meeting, we spent considerable time discussing how we can serve as the eyes and ears at airports across South Dakota. South Dakota Pilot Association has 7 directors, each responsible for reporting on airports within their respective territories. Our members are active users of these facilities and are often among the first to observe emerging issues, safety concerns, or developments that may affect airport operations. To make that collaboration effective, having a clear and direct line of communication, such as a dedicated phone number or an email address where time-critical information can be reported, that would be extremely helpful. Timely communication can prevent small issues from becoming larger safety concerns. The South Dakota Pilot Association remains concerned about proliferation of tall structures, particularly wind energy developments. Also, structures in critical approach and departure corridors present operational and safety consideration that deserve careful review and coordination. Protecting the integrity of our airports and surrounding airspace is essential to maintaining a safe, reliable aviation operations across the state. We look forward to continuing communication with the Commission and the Office of Aeronautics. Constructive collaboration between government entities, industry, and pilots is key to ensuring aviation safety. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Okay, thank you, Dale. And just for the commissioners here, since I haven't communicated a lot with you, what I've asked Dale's organization to do, that they report up to him, so we're not getting 200-300 inputs, and he can get a hold of us. And with you guys all being on different airports, you know, people come to you. I would like to hear about it, you know, and see if there is things that you think we can accomplish. I want input, you know, from everybody here, you know. Don't just want to be a rubber stamp. If there's something that, especially safety, my experience is in air traffic control for 35 years, you know, losing one airplane is tough. Any other public input?
I do have a question about what you brought up. So what's the proper, I guess, path if someone brings something up to us? For example, I had a medevac pilot who flies in and out of Rosebud all the time talk about how they have to cancel flights or go to different airports because the approaches into Rosebud. There's only the one that's kind of questionable. Where do we even begin?
unless any of you are,
Mr. Chairman, if I.
Yeah.
Again, I think the first call is to the airport manager, and hopefully, if we don't have that list, I'm assuming Jack, we've got it somewhere, that's where the first one would reach out, and then probably Jack in his office. As you know, we physically go out and inspect each airport on a yearly basis, at least the GAs, and so we could get into contact with the same airport manager if you're not able to do that. That would be my suggestion, Mr. Chairman.
And
So,
that-
I would imagine everybody's got Jack's number, I know I do, so.
Okay. All I ask though is, if you do pass it on to Jack, let me know. Just so when it comes up, I'm not clueless.
Right.
Any other questions, input? Okay, well, we're done with public input, so I guess we're up to Joel.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman, or afternoon, I'm Chairman and Commissioners. I've got, typically for the new gentleman on board, I'll do kind of a federal update as well as a state update. And for the state update, we've been pretty busy on bills and stuff, but hopefully, as you all know, on February 1st, the president did sign at least the 11 appropriations bills, and one of those was the DHUD bill, which is really significant from a transportation aspect. Within that appropriations bill, there's each senator and congressman can designate projects that they would like to see funded. In the old days, we used to call them earmarks. Today, they're called, and at least on the Senate side, it's congressional directed spending. So with the passage of that appropriations bill, Rapid City will receive $20 million in federal funds, and Sioux Falls was approved for $30 million. So it's a positive thing for those two airports, and I know they work directly with the senators. Representative Johnson does not do any earmarks, so it's been the two senators with that. So again, great news for them on the FAA funding as a whole. In essence, the AIP remained very similar for the amount of funding from 25 to 26. They did also put in some dollars that would transfer funds out of the general funds and the IDJA, which is the current surface transportation bill that actually expires in September. So in essence, as that moves forward now, John and FAA can work with that relative to what projects now will get funded for FY26. And John will have a presentation later on here as far as all of those projects that is being looked at this point in time. On the state side, I'll start with legislation. The fun one is Senate Bill 70, which was to combine all of the boards and commissions, well, I should say all three of those, the Aeronautics, State Railroad Board, and the Transportation Commission into one. I had sent well, not to the new guys, but sent each one of you an email on that. It also had the draft bill at that point in time. The goal from a department standpoint was really look more at as a holistic commission. Right now, you guys are siloed into different disciplines, and with that, the goal was to at least get 2 individuals on each board and put them into this newly formed commission. So we would have had expertise from 2 aeronautics commission, 2 railroad commissioners, and then the remainder would have been left over. Realizing that at least both the Pilot Association and Commissioner Coleman in his unofficial capacity, as not as a commissioner, but just as a private individual. We had a couple airport managers of Rapid City, Sioux Falls, and Hot Springs, as well as some other pilots and a few other folks that gave testimony that they were opposed to the bill. Primary reason was that by taking only 2 of you as commissioners, you would dilute the aeronautics role and responsibilities overall from a statewide perspective. I get that, and again, hopefully, I don't know if it's today, but eventually we can have more discussions relative to that and get more of your ideas of how we can truly make this interconnected with the other commissions, as opposed to right now, you guys really do not deal with those other 2 modes. So that bill, in essence, went to the 41st day in the Senate Transportation Committees. Senate Bill 76 is to allow the, excuse me, I'm trying to get my notes here. In essence, provide $15 million of funds to primarily the city of Rapid City and Sioux Falls through the South Dakota Housing Authority. There's leftover monies that have not been obligated and spent to date, and so those funds could be used as a loan for those two entities and be at 0% for 20-year amortization on that. And again, that bill at this point in time has passed the Senate Commerce and Energy Committee, and now it goes on to the full Senate. So it's still gotta get out of the Senate here. They have until the 24th to get that done. That's crossover day for them. So a lot of bills in, not quite as many in the Senate as the House, but a lot of things that need to be wrapped up. Senate Bill 205. It is a bill to revise the registration fees for drones, and with that, to establish a brand new fund that would go to the Board of Technical Education. We were the lone entity that testified against that bill, and the reason why we testified against the bill, that those monies currently go into the Aeronautics Commission Fund. About $70,000 in the last 3 years. In this past year, it was about $47,000. So as you're looking at this fund, and we're gonna modify our testimony here a little bit and really key in on really the funding overall of that it would provide. So if you look at $50,000 a year, that truly is $2 million of buying power with the federal AIP program that you guys provide matches for. So it'll eventually go on to the House. I don't know if it's been assigned to a committee yet. And the testimony for that was Senator Voida from Bone Steel had some farmers reach out to her and say, you know what, I'm paying this 3% excise tax. It's going into the aeronautics fund. I don't even get to fly my drone in and around an airport, and so why should those funds go to the Aeronautics Commission for their use? Well, for us, it was more of the general aviation, and again, the funding that you guys provide for the airports as well as other things. And it would actually limit the ability for what these funds could be spent on. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. I think we'll probably end up sending an email out to the airport managers eventually and at least make them aware of it. Again, these are funds that will no longer be put into this fund. Back in 21, the fund was getting so low that they had to, through a bill, provide $4 million to put back into this fund to get it back up to a point where it was sufficient enough. But with that, this commission had decided not to fund any revenue generating projects, so those are at a 0% match. I think at some point in time, you guys need to reconsider or relook at that just based on the fact of what the fund amount is right now today. But that's another day, another discussion, another topic. But it is concerning for us that these funds would be completely gone forever and not be able to utilize those on aviation. Senate Bill 219 is a bill that Senator Hone had proposed. The bill, in essence, the current statute requires that a state agency consult with the Aeronautics Commission when purchasing, transferring, or disposing of a state-owned or operated aircraft, including a drone, because drone is physically in the definition of what an aircraft is. She has now amended that bill to exclude drones out of the language, as well as the amendment eliminates or excludes the Board of Regents or any institution of higher education from having to come to this commission to get that approval. The current statute is, I would say, weak. That's a right term for that, Carla, where it truly does not dictate that a state agency has to go to this commission to get your advice, but it does require you to provide the advice. So with the amended bill, this will make it clearer that any agency wanting to dispose, purchase, or transfer an aircraft, and we're talking airplanes primarily, that they have to come to you. And with this bill, if it does pass, you have to provide the advice, and it has to be in such that it's a written report to the governor and to the state agency that is requesting your advice. So my last thing before we get into HP is we still have one vacancy left on the commission. So if you've got some names or suggestions for a candidate, ask you that you would send those to us. We would then put those forward relative to the governor, who then eventually makes the decision of who to appoint to the Aeronautics Commission. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll pause with that report and open it up if anybody has any questions or any dialogue or discussion that you wanna have relative to those things.
Yeah, I have a question on the last one. Is the bill structured, you know, that it excludes drones and Board of Education planes, the Tufts planes, but I know we do not have helicopters with any of the agencies we're responsible for, but is the wording such that helicopters would be covered if somebody acquires it?
Correct. Based on what the terminology is in Title 50, it would require helicopters, I think,
Okay,
even balloons, blimps, whatever. So in essence, drones was excluded, but all of those other things under that definition would be required to come to you.
okay.
And did you did you mention small drones, or was that?
Drones, which would be, let me just read it to you, excluding any unmanned aircraft, small unmanned aircraft, and small unmanned aircraft systems as defined in 50-1-1. Anything else?
I'm good.
All right. So the next item on your agenda is an informational item, and Secretary Perry is here with staff relative to the Highway Patrol's aircraft purchase. I know that they were in front of the Joint Committee of Appropriations today and had maybe a similar discussion dialogue, but I will turn it over to Colonel Collins, who will kind of brief you as far as this topic.
Yeah, good afternoon. Secretary John, thank you. Chairman Huggins, nice to talk to you over the last month or so, but appreciate the commission having me here today. I'm Colonel Casey Collins. I'm Superintendent of the Highway Patrol. I just want to give you a brief status update of where we're at as an aviation program, and then talk a little bit about what we're trying to accomplish with Senate Bill 69. So I think it's important just to set my expectations for any piece of equipment that we have in the Highway Patrol. Just to start, and that will make maybe a little more sense as I get through my testimony here. You know, for public safety equipment, it's got to be mission ready when the call comes in. In law enforcement, it's unacceptable for us to say, hey, we're unavailable because we're down for maintenance. The aircraft is included in that expectation. So, you know, when a sheriff's office calls for a search and rescue mission for a missing person, or our troopers need overwatch during a high stakes operation, we really need an asset that we can launch immediately, and it can get there quick and do the job. Currently, the Highway Patrol operates the only dedicated law enforcement air asset in the state. We average about 400 hours of flight time a year. Missions, a lot of times we launch here out of Pier. Our average mission time, I think, is just over 5 hours. So a lot of times what we do is we go somewhere and we circle for a long period of time. Low power orbit, if that's what you call it. Should have laid the disclaimer, I'm not a pilot, I'm a cop, so that's why we rely on your technical expertise. So, but a lot of those missions are simply just going to a place and orbiting at low power for a long period of time. So right now we have a 2004 Cessna T206. We acquired that in 2007. And it's really for a few different reasons I'll get into, just not meeting the mission right now. The airframe currently has 5,844 hours on it. The engine's at just over 1,300 hours, 1,304. And in 2025, we were down for 95 days, over a quarter of the year for maintenance-related items. That equates out to about 2,304 hours of total downtime, the vast majority of that being unscheduled maintenance. Probably the largest issue we faced in 2025 was a piston cylinder issue in October. Obviously, when we had that occur, we prefer OEM new parts for that. That quickly became not an option when we called. We were told they're on a 22-month back order. Fortunately, the failure of the cylinder wasn't so severe that it couldn't be repaired. We found a shop to repair that out of Minnesota and got us back up operational. We had a pitot static failure during the Sturgis Rally, along with alternator issues and magneto issues. Our electronics, the ports to update those are getting to a point where they're failing on a regular basis. Obviously, you guys know that causes issues with our instrument ability to fly. The camera really is kind of the bread and butter for us in this. I mean, the airplane, obviously we need certain capabilities, but the camera is really what we're interested in law enforcement. gives us that FLIR ability, gives us the ability to zoom in on something from a distance away, and of course record evidence. That camera right now is end of life last year, so if it breaks, we're stuck. Right now, it does fail on a regular basis. The only way to fix that is to land the plane, reboot the whole system, and go back up. You might know we had the vice president in the Black Hills last year. That occurred when we had the vice president there, and that's just really an inexcusable malfunction of our equipment. Along with that, just to wrap up the maintenance things, I mentioned earlier we're at about 1,304 hours on this engine. So we fly about 400 hours a year. So in the next year to year and a half, we're looking at an engine replacement. We're being told up to 30 months for back order on those right now. That's obviously going to be an issue as well. So to move into kind of some of the other challenges that aren't just mechanical, really inherent to the airframe itself, you know, the equipment we have on this aircraft, when we have a pilot flying the plane and a tactical flight officer in the back running the camera, we're down. There's an example in Pier. We have several people that run the camera, but one primarily out of Pier here, we have about 48 pounds to give in our payload. So, you know, if we want to haul a piece of equipment, if we need to take a explosives detection dog somewhere quickly to bring the dog and the handler, we can't do that. Or, you know, we don't leave the aircraft full of fuel, or we're going to burn fuel off, or whatever the case may be. But the payload really is a significant concern for us. It limits what we're able to do. I think you all probably know this, but the 206 is not certified for flying into node icing. If you talk to some of the folks that have been around our aviation program a lot longer than I have, that's the primary reason why we say no on missions, is because there are icing conditions and we can't take the mission. The other item I guess I just mentioned on weather, I'm told 38 knot winds are pretty tough for us to get to the runway here in Pier. Lately, that seems like it's been about once a week, unfortunately, but obviously those are concerns for us as well with the current aircraft. This kind of, you know, some people look at this as a luxury item. I'm sure you all don't, but you know, in the summertime, on the flip side of the climate control, well, this doesn't have air conditioning. So when we're at the rally or during one of these summertime missions, we're really balancing pilot fatigue and the fatigue of the operator in the back that's staring at a screen like this, trying to pick out a needle in a haystack. With, hey, can we drink water? We have to land and go to the bathroom. That really becomes kind of a fatigue issue and a safety concern there. So we've, that's kind of where our current status is at, what we use the aircraft for. We've done a lot of outreach with public safety agencies across the country. Our own staff, obviously, the DOT aviation staff, we relied on them a lot. Which has kind of led us towards the turbine-powered platform is where we're the direction we're heading. We'd like to head. Obviously, reliability there is something that we're looking at for the type of loitering missions that we do. Again, we fly somewhere, we sit there and circle for hours on end. Obviously, that kind of aligns us with the rest of the state fleet, with the 90 and the 350 being a similar motor with the DOT aviation staff already is familiar with. The payload capacity is really a big one for us. With this plane, obviously, you know, we're looking to improve our camera. Right now, the camera we have is end of life. We're looking to get higher. We're looking to get up closer to 10,000 feet. To do our business, that's a bigger camera that's capable of zooming in from farther away. So the payload capacity is really what we're looking for there. Obviously, you know, the air is a little better up there the higher you get, and that's obviously a little safer for us as well. I mentioned the icing conditions, you know, but really the other item is when we fly at a pier, we fly to one of the corners of the state. The first thing we're thinking about is, instead of engaging in the mission, is where's the next stop for fuel, because we're going to have to probably get fuel pretty quick when we get there. So that's kind of my brief rundown. You know, I'll just kind of conclude with, you know, I think it's my responsibility when the call comes in that we have an asset to send for the highway patrol. It's really non-negotiable for us. We've got to have something to send, and so we're looking for a long-term solution here that answers the call, you know, regardless of the weather conditions or temperature or a maintenance back order on an engine. So that's what I have prepared. I'm certainly happy to take any questions, Secretary or Chairman. So.
Anybody?
I have a couple of questions for you. You said that the engine currently has about 1,300 some hours on it.
1,304 is the number I have, yep.
You know what that TBO or time before overhaul is suggested for that engine?
I'm gonna take a stab at this, and Ron Hauk is on the line as well. He can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's about 1,700 to 2,000 hours is what I'm told.
2,000 hours.
Thanks, Ron.
Known ice, as a pilot, you typically don't fly in known ice. Those are for kind of eventualities that you deal with. And let me preface some of my remarks by, I'm not opposed to the airplane at all. I just would like to know if this is specific for a mission, does it fulfill the needs of that mission?
Sure.
So I just would like to look at some of those things. And I know Ron, so.
Yeah. I would certainly lean you that way. I'm not the expert there, as you know. All I'm looking for is when it's below 32 degrees and there's some moisture in the air, I'd like to be able to send the airplane is my concern.
And some of the crosswind components, you know what and Ron probably knows this, the demonstrated crosswind component of the 206 versus the Kodiak 100, do you know those numbers?
I don't, Ron.
I don't know those offhand.
The 206 is actually
I
20
believe,
and the Kodiak 16 knots of crosswind component. So once again, does that fit into the mission? I guess that's my question. And the service ceiling on a 206 versus a Kodiak 100, because you've said that the mission needs to be higher.
Yeah.
And Ryan could probably answer this. Do you know the service ceiling of the 206 versus the Kodiak 100?
I do not know.
I think the other thing to note there too, we want to get a bigger camera, and that the payload capacity is really where that comes in. We can't put the bigger camera on the 206. So even if we bought a new 206, it really doesn't solve that camera issue for us.
So the camera will be a new entity no matter what you get, though, correct?
Our current camera's failing and it's end of life.
Right.
We have to buy something.
Yeah, I guess those are some just questions that I have. And once again, is that the best aircraft for the mission? And I respect Ron a lot and his expertise, and I'm sure he's weighed in on this. But I think it would also be advantageous to get some of the input from members of the commission as well. So.
And I want to be very clear, you mentioned a Kodiak 100. We've not engaged in a Kodiak 100 that's the aircraft we buy.
Right.
Obviously, that's a popular brand out there, but there are others, the Caravan as well that are out there. So we've not made any procurement. Essentially, we don't have any money. So there's really no discussion to have if we don't have any money. We don't go looking for a new car if we don't have any money in the bank. So that's kind of where we're at. But yeah, certainly appreciate that, and I can work with Ron to answer those questions for you.
Okay.
The amount of money that I saw that you guys had requested, that was going to be everything, including the camera and the airframe, correct?
Yeah, so that's one of the most confusing parts on this, I think, we've had to kind of try to clarify is the aircraft we're looking for is somewhere around $3 million. The technology, the camera alone is almost 1.4 million. So by the time you do the camera for 1.4 million, I think the radio and mapping integration was around 450,000. By the time you install it, integration, inspection fees, that's how we get to the total $5 million cost.
And where is the bill now? Is it progressing? Is it going to go to the 41st day?
Well, so I testified in joint appropriations this morning. They deferred action on that bill, which I think is fairly common with budgetary items until they're ready to make some decisions. So it's still alive. I think the testimony went well with the committee, and we answered the questions that they had. So.
2 days before session will end, you'll know.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll definitely know the deal.
You mentioned the current engine has 1,304 hours, and you're putting 400-ish hours on a year. So roughly 4 years ago, did you swap the engine, or did you overhaul, or what happened?
I think we did an overhaul the last time. Ron, do you remember? I'm sorry. Probably should just let you answer that one. It
was a factory remand due to the the flying that airplane does, a lot of it at night in some rugged terrain once in a while. We generally do not do overhauls.
And then just out of curiosity, how much does the camera equipment weigh?
Well, so there are a few different options, and I have man, I know way more about this than I thought I'd ever would in my life when I became a cop. So there are essentially three different options. There's kind of like the lightweight one that we have now, a middle camera, and then the heavier one. I don't know that I have that with me today. I can certainly kind of get you those options. There's really two types of cameras that we're kind of looking at. I have it somewhere, sorry. A Westcam MX-15 and a Traca TC375 are two options that we've. It's a little tough with those as well because they don't give you pricing until you get to a certain period of time, and so we have great estimates. But those are a couple that we've been advised are good options for what we're looking for.
Where would the current 206 go?
I would assume we would sell it. We would look to sell it. How that process goes, I don't know. We've looked at a couple different options with expanding our aviation program and maybe leaving one in Sioux Falls. There's a lot of work in Sioux Falls for us, it seems like. But with the airframe and the condition it's in and what it needs, I just don't know that that's the best option financially for us to move forward when we consider those options. It certainly is an option, but there are several other factors that kind of went into that decision as well. Just have a small hole on the side for the camera.
I was just gonna say, there must be a hole in it.
Yeah.
Anything from anybody else? Anything you wanna add?
No, thank you for the opportunity to come speak with you. If you have anything for me, please reach
Thanks for
out. It's
coming
been a
in.
great conversation, so thank you.
Colonel, you'll get those questions answered and we'll just provide those to the.
Absolutely.
commission.
Yep. We'll do. Thank you.
Anything else from you, Joe?
That's all that I have. I would like to prop up your next topic on the agenda though. So as, especially we have new commissioners on the board and even the dialogue and the discussion with the different bills during the legislative session, we felt it was important, and Chairman, we talked to you about this, is to kind of go through the commission's handbook, guideline, I don't know, Jack, what we call this, handbook, as well as go through from a high level, statutory things are on the books right now, and Carla's gonna go through this, but I would encourage you to ask questions and get this information, truly to understand it, to the degree that Carla's going to explain it, so that you feel much more comfortable as far as your roles and responsibilities overall. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, is it okay for me to hand it off to?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Carla Engel and I'm Chief Legal Counsel for the South Dakota DOT. So the attachment for this agenda item, it's attachment 2, and it's a handbook that has been put together for the Aeronautics Commission. I think we've had it for a couple years now, but I did take the liberty of trying to update it to include a section that talks about the powers of the Aeronautics Commission. And so I do want to take some time, if I may, to talk about that. So I think that's page 7 of the handbook. If I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And I want to preface by talking about a statute that was adopted by the legislature in 1997. It was slightly modified in 2025, but that's really not relevant to our discussions today. So that statute really lays out the authority of the Aeronautics Commission in essentially 4 different areas. Advisory functions, what's called special budgetary functions, which I've called funding functions in this document. Quasi-legislative functions, that's really rulemaking. You have some experience with rulemaking recently. And then quasi-judicial functions. And the way that's defined is, it's a bit confusing to me, but that's basically what I labeled as C, regulatory authority over aviation facilities and aircraft, and E, which is the rest of the quasi-judicial functions, which I think of as like hearings and appeals deciding controversies. So in this statute, and I'd like to take a moment just to read the relevant portions of it. 144-11 says, "The Department of Transportation shall, under the direction and control of the Secretary of Transportation, perform all the functions of the Aeronautics Commission except," and then it lists certain advisory functions, certain special budgetary functions, which are the funding functions, and then certain quasi-legislative and quasi-judicial functions. So the general framework is that the department, through the direction of the secretary, performs all functions of the commission that are set out in the code, except for these specific functions that we're gonna go through now, that fall within the power and authority of the Aeronautics Commission. So to be,
Could I just interrupt, Carl? So that was a big change prior to back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever, where the Aeronautics Commission, in essence, was the agency or the authority that had authority, and FAA wasn't even in place at that point in time. And over the years, things have changed immensely.
and that's actually true, if you look back at like the Railroad Board and the Transportation Commission, these public bodies, they often change over time. And so that's been the case with the Aeronautics Commission, and that's not unusual. There was actually a point in time when there was something called the Board of Transportation that performed some of the Aeronautics Commission's authority with simply advice from the Aeronautics Commission. That didn't last long, but that was the case for a period of time. So I do want to talk about the functions of the Aeronautics Commission, if I may now. And like I say, I tried to divide it in ways that made sense to me. But it basically falls within those four authorities. So the advisory functions of the Aeronautics Commission include, you always have the opportunity, there's a broad statute that authorizes you to provide advice, gather information, and make recommendations with respect to the programs associated with the commission. So that's some part of your advisory function. There's also the authority that Secretary Junt mentioned earlier when he was talking about legislation to provide advice to other state agencies about the purchase of aircraft. And then also, and it was, I believe, included in the handbook, to annually report to the governor about the commission's activities. In terms of funding functions, pretty broad authority with regard to funding airport facilities. So approving expenditure and disbursement of grants or funds appropriated for matching purposes, for planning, construction, development, operation, marking, and maintenance of airport facilities. And then finally, and Secretary Junt referred to this earlier as well, to support advancement of aviation and aviation commerce. So for example, the legislation that's currently being considered to divert certain funds from the Aeronautics Commission for like drone education, frankly, you currently have the authority to allocate money for that purpose from the Aeronautics Fund. Other examples are funding education. I know there's been money that's gone to SDSU for some of its facilities and programs. There's also determining whether or not airports qualify for aircraft fuel tax for lighting, marking, and maintenance of runways, taxiways, and parking areas. The allocation rate for aircraft fuel tax to eligible airports. There's another statute that authorizes matching funds for purchase of sites for airports and for construction, development, and maintenance of airports. There's an interesting statute that actually authorizes short-term loans from the Aeronautics Commission. It's for a period of 3 years to finance aviation-related projects. And you also have the authority to withhold future funding from local zoning authorities if they do not require compliance with proper zoning in relation to airports. I did mention a limitation, and that's simply that all funds from the aeronautics fund have to be appropriated. That's a little bit different than the Transportation Commission and also than the Railroad Board. They have certain funds that are continuously appropriated. So the Transportation Commission, all money for construction that comes out of the Highway Trust Fund is continuously appropriated. And there are categories of funding that the Railroad Board has authority over that are also continuously appropriated. So they don't need an appropriation from the legislature, but that's not true for the Aeronautics Commission.
So with that, the funding in the aeronautics fund, in essence, is in the department's budget that the legislators approve on a yearly basis.
So now I want to move on to the regulatory authority, and again, that's considered part, that is considered part of your quasi-judicial. So quasi-judicial includes not only determining controversies, but it can also mean things like setting fees, enforcing the law, really regulating entities. And so that is another major responsibility of the Aeronautics Commission. So the commission approves public airports and certain private airports, so you issue certificates of approval. You also set the charge for that through administrative rule. You can order the closing of airports or other air navigation facilities until they comply with the requirements of their certificate. You have the authority to inspect or have your agents inspect any premises, buildings, or other structures where airports or other air navigation facilities are operated. So we have staff here at the department that perform that function. You can institute court actions to prevent, restrain, correct, or abate violations of airport zoning statutes, regulations, orders, or rulings. So for example, the FAA makes determinations of no hazard, and so essentially those structures get permitted. But if there are violations, it's the Aeronautics Commission that actually has the enforcement authority to ensure that those FAA requirements are satisfied. And then you also prescribe forms relating to the original registration tax. In terms of quasi-legislative functions, so that's rulemaking authority. You are constrained in that all rules promulgated by the commission must be consistent with federal law and regulations governing aeronautics. But the areas that you have rulemaking authority are certificates of approval for certain public and private airports. Those were rules that you recently worked on. Fees for airport approval applications, ascertainment, assessment, collection, and return of the additional original registration tax, and aircraft dealer licensing. And then finally, the remaining quasi-judicial functions that you can perform. You can decide appeals concerning renewal of aircraft dealer licenses when they fail to meet certain sale or brokerage requirements. I think it's been a little while since that's happened, but that has happened. There have been times you've been asked to make those decisions. You can hold hearings and issue decisions on the revocation, suspension, or renewal of aircraft dealer licenses. Like every agency, virtually every agency has the power and authority to consider petitions for declaratory rulings concerning how the statutes apply relating to your authority or any rule or order of the commission. And then if there is conflicting jurisdiction between the commission and a political subdivision over the erection of structures in relation to an airport or other air navigation facility, you may hold a public hearing and overrule or modify zoning rules and regulations adopted by the political subdivision or its airport zoning board. And then finally, I did include the conflict of interest statute, and there's actually a separate section of the handbook that goes into much more detail about conflicts of interest. And I'm not going to belabor that discussion here because I think you're all good. You've all complied with the law. If you do have questions about that, though, you can always contact me, and I'm happy to talk to anyone about that. And then finally, I wanted to talk, I included these here. And I wanted to visit about them because it's a little bit tricky in my view. I'll start with, so the miscellaneous. So we've got this miscellaneous category, but you'll recall when I started this conversation, I said the department performs all functions except these very specific functions that remain with the Aeronautics Commission. So the secretary and the department handle everything else that doesn't fall within those four categories: advisory, quasi-legislative, quasi-judicial, and then special budgetary functions. So the second one I included mainly because I thought it was important to understand so folks who apply for aerial application of pesticides for agricultural purposes, they're governed by DANR, and it's the Secretary of DANR who issues those licenses. But they do have to comply with FAA and Aeronautics Commission requirements. Thought that was interesting and important for folks to know that you do have that kind of sideways regulatory authority. But finally, I do want to talk about number one, which talks about the operation of the Commission's aircraft for other departments of state government with reimbursement paid to the department to defray the cost of this service. So the statute, and I tried to include all of the statutes that are talked about here because I wanted you to be able to have how the statutes actually read. So on page 25 is this statute. And it's 50-2-15. And it says the commission, when its state aircraft are not being used in the conduct of the necessary activities of the department, may operate the aircraft for other departments of the state. We took a close look at this statute for a couple of reasons. First of all, there are currently no aircraft that are titled in the name of the commission. They're titled in the name of the Department of Transportation. Why might?
And it should be,
Oh, yes, there is Highway Patrol. Yeah.
three aircraft.
So why might the statute refer to the commission and its aircraft when there are none? And you'll recall I talked about that first statute, 1-44-11. And 1-44-11, it's kind of I don't know the term to use, but you can sometimes amend statutes, all the statutes that relate to a subject, or you can do a blanket statute to accomplish what you want to accomplish. And that's what they did here with 1-44-11. So unless it's an advisory function, one of those special budgetary functions, or quasi-legislative or quasi-judicial, it's performed by the department. So the ownership of aircraft, when it refers to the commission, under this statute, that means the department under the direction and control of the secretary. And then if you look at the rest of that statute, it refers consistently to the department collecting the money for that and then using that money for its aircraft. So that was the one statute that I put it in the miscellaneous category because I wanted to explain how I believe the reference to commission now means the department and the department's aircraft. So that's my summary of the Aeronautics Commission's roles and responsibilities. I do want to talk about some other items in the handbook, but this might be a good time to pause and I'll be happy to respond to any questions you might have.
Do you think that needs to be changed then, as far as stating the department as opposed to the commission?
Mr. Chairman, I think so. I think it's confusing the way it is. And, you practically have to have a law degree to figure that out. So I think that's a good cleanup item. We did a huge statutory revision a number of years ago. It was a tremendous undertaking, and I think we maybe even had one or two commission members who assisted with that. So, and we had stakeholders who helped with that. It was a huge undertaking, and there are little bits and pieces that can sometimes be missed, and you find those later and you try to clean them up. You try to avoid them to begin with, but you know, that was a huge undertaking, and so that's one item I think we should probably clean up. And we've identified one other, I believe. And the details, I think we have a reference to commission in another statute, and it's not clear if we mean county commission or aeronautics commission. We think with the context, it's very clear it's aeronautics commission, but that's another cleanup item we identified when we were doing this work, actually. So.
I have a question. Do you think when this was originally written, and maybe you addressed this earlier, that it was considered more the commission as opposed to the department?
I do think that one thing we've done a lot of reviewing of old statutes in connection with this. We even located our administrative secretary, Carrie. She located a history book that was put together by a historian from SDSU, where he went into detail about not only the history of the Aeronautics Commission, but transportation in general in South Dakota. And I believe what we learned is that the commissioners used to fly people around.
And own the planes.
Yeah. Till 1973.
So it evolved and to where we are today.
But do we need to make this a future agenda item to talk about? And I like to have rules down firm so we don't have continuing, people trying to interpret it. Do we need to, or how should we handle that?
Mr. Chair, I think that's up to you guys, if you wanna kinda hit this on a quarterly basis, or at least a couple times a year. One, to refresh yourselves as far as what the statutes read, as well as two, I think, and again, I'll look to legal and the attorneys that she has with her. I think we've done a pretty good job of cleaning up, as she's mentioned, 4 to 5 years ago, we went through Title 50, but we missed some things, and so that was one of them. But other than that, I don't really think there's a lot of cleanup ones that need to be done, but again, as things change, it doesn't hurt to look at revising it to in a correct manner.
So I don't think we're really in a big hurry with the legislature in session
No.
and stuff like that, but.
Well, it's too late to pass, or
Okay.
to file any bill
Yeah,
whatsoever.
so look forward to like later in the summer.
That might be a good idea.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm shaking my head for Ralph, you can't see online.
I think he heard it.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I did want to touch briefly on open meetings because we have new commission members. And this is going to be changing. There were 3 open meetings bills that I believe were passed. So that'll be changing. There'll be some slight changes in July. I can tell you, most of the changes that were adopted, DOT already does. Thank you, Carrie. So we take it very seriously that the public's business needs to be conducted in public. So I'll just briefly, I'm sorry, I think this is Appendix B in your handout. It's the open meeting brochure, and I thought I would just touch on that a little bit if I may, Mr. Chairman. This is a brochure that is prepared by the Attorney General's office. He is actually required to prepare a brochure, and then once a year, this commission is required to review it. And you guys just reviewed this version of the brochure, not all of you, because some of you are new, but in July, this was reviewed. But it doesn't hurt to go through it again, because I know we do have some new members. So South Dakota's open meetings laws essentially require that the public's business be conducted in public. And so whenever there is a gathering of a quorum of the Aeronautics Commission, so that's 4 members, and they talk about official business, that's a meeting under the law. So if 4 of you go out for dinner tonight and you start to talk about maybe some airport projects that are coming up, you just had a meeting and you just violated the open meetings law because it wasn't noticed and the public didn't have an opportunity to participate. And so very often, I am the scold here, telling you, don't do that. And honestly, what we try to do is we try to avoid even the appearance of impropriety. So I have advised commissions and our rail board, don't even sit together in a restaurant in a quorum. Because people draw their own conclusions and they get a decision that's adverse to them and they start looking for reasons why. And so it's just better to avoid that. So we try to hit above the floor. You can have teleconferences like we are today, but we actually have to provide a place for the public to participate when we have a teleconference meeting. That we ran into some problems with that during COVID, and sometimes snowstorms require us to reschedule meetings because of that. We have to provide notice. It has to be posted. When you came in today, you may have seen the notice for today's meeting out on our door. It has to be posted at least 72 hours in advance. Carrie always beats that. And we also post it on our website. You have the discretion, so we have to have public input. That is required. It has to be an agenda item. But you do have the discretion to limit it. And so you can impose time limits if it looks like it's going to interfere with the rest of your business. Public meetings can be recorded, and we actually record this meeting and it gets posted on our website. Can a meeting be closed to the public? Only for very limited reasons. And I tried to highlight the two that would apply. One is personnel issues. You can go into executive session for that purpose. And then the one that's used most frequently is consulting with legal counsel or reviewing communications from legal counsel about proposed or pending litigation or contractual matters. So you can enjoy an attorney-client privilege just like any other business or entity. But when you go into executive session, your discussion has to be limited to those discussion items. So you can't then veer into, let's talk about, what's next on the agenda. You have to confine it to the reason you went into executive session. And we have to actually identify that reason in the motion. So to go into executive session, you have to have a motion that's passed. While you're in executive session, you can discuss the item that relates to that authorized reason for executive session, but you can't take action in executive session. If you're going to come out and you're going to terminate a contract because of advice from legal counsel during executive session, or take some other action, you need to take the action in an open meeting. Let's see. What happens if you violate open meetings law? It's a Class 2 misdemeanor, punishable by up to 30 days in jail or a $500 fine or both. Or, in the alternative, it could be a reprimand by the Open Meetings Commission. Knock on wood, I hope this is wood, the Department of Transportation has never had a reprimand or had any kind of violation cited. So, and we hope to keep it that way.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may, so who's getting penalized? The secretary or the aeronautics commissioners? Just clarify this one.
Well, I don't want to go into that. I'll probably be fired. I think it's the commission itself, the commission members. I think they could each be, the reprimand would be directed towards the commission, and maybe you've seen that in the newspaper. Some city or county having a citation for a violation. But I do think it would be the members who would be responsible. And you can make a complaint. The way complaints can be made, they can be made by any citizen to the law enforcement officials in the county. The state's attorney reviews that and then decides whether to charge it or refer it. Forward the complaint onto the Open Meetings Commission. So we have to post a proposed agenda. And that's what we've done. So this agenda would have gotten posted outside our door and it's posted on our website. Can it change? So you can do that. Secretary John will tell you this, I am very reluctant to see last minute changes because I worry whether people will conclude that was a way of depriving them of the opportunity to know what we were gonna do and participate in that. You can do it. If you do it, you should really make a genuine effort. Notify the media, all the media who've indicated they wanna be notified. Make sure they know we're changing the agenda. And just try to get the word out to people you think would be interested, if you have to do that, but we really try hard to avoid that. I think it invites speculation that we're trying to avoid public participation.
So maybe a little more on that, so before every meeting, we get with the chairman and we talk about agenda items and eventually make a decision of which one should go on the agenda, and that gets posted in with that, so. Is it the commission chairman who's making the call, we're working together on that to decide what that might look like.
And the materials that we provide to you, they also are public documents unless they qualify for executive session, like correspondence from me about pending or proposed litigation or contractual matters that are pending or proposed. So generally, those materials are provided, we post them on the website and we make them available here.
Carla?
Yeah,
So now, say the commissioner would like to have an item on the agenda. Is it, if they send the copy of the email, like they're sending it to me, but if they include everybody else, so you got like 5 or 6, is that considered an open meeting violation?
so, scheduling matters, you know, if you're sending an email about scheduling, I'm not gonna be able to make it, or, you know, can we move a meeting, those kinds of things are okay. Discussions in an email, that's considered a meeting. So again, you've really got to avoid that, just like sitting at the restaurant, if you send emails to the Aeronautics Commission or quorum of the commission, that's a violation of the open meetings law. Now, what if you did this? What if you sent the same email individually to every commission member? This is what I think about this item, what do you think? I would not recommend that. I think when you're doing that, you know, you're skirting the law. The intent of the law is that those discussions happen here, so the public can hear them. So please do not do that. I think it's a violation of the law. Even if you do it one by one by one by one, it just doesn't meet the spirit of the law. So be very careful about emails. You'll often see, you know, if we're sending materials to you, we'll send materials and sometimes we'll say, please do not reply all, please don't discuss this until we have the meeting. So just very important. The minutes of this meeting, we're required to make those minutes available within 10 business days after the meeting. We have a fallback, so if we have a recording, we can meet the requirement of that. But Carrie and I, we've already decided we're never gonna do that. We want the minutes to be available within 10 business days after the meeting. We just wanna make sure we're good. You can appoint, let's say you decide to appoint a task force of maybe 2 members who are gonna go maybe on an inspection of an airport that's been reported as problematic or something. And then that task force is gonna come back and report. You can do that, as long as it's less than a quorum, right, then it's not a meeting. But if you come back to the commission and report on that, you can't take action on that item until the next meeting. Again, giving the public the opportunity to hear the report, and then maybe they'll have some input on that. So that's another protection for the public. And again, we'll be reviewing this again. There'll be an updated brochure from the Attorney General's office, and we'll be reviewing that probably again in July. But if you have any questions about open meetings, please let me know. I'll be happy to answer your questions. that was all that I was gonna review, in the packet. Again, there's a long section about conflicts of interest, and there's actually some pretty helpful materials about navigating that. There's a decision matrix in there. But, you know, if you have any questions about conflicts of interest, please give me a call and we'll go through that. So, are there any questions for me?
Don't hear any. Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Jack Duncan is next. Or John, or whoever these guys are doing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have informational items. While John's getting set up here, I'll just remind the commission that our airports conference is April 7th and 8th this year. The April 7th is for CIP meetings. They'll be held in this room with individual airports, and then April 8th is the conference. And like Carla mentioned about open meetings rules, we're only allowed 3 commissioners to attend at a time. So I think that's something for you all to think about over this next month of, you know, who can attend and who can't, and then maybe we can talk about that in the March meeting to get you guys ready for that. So, but with that, we've got John here to present some informational items, and I'll let John take it away. So.
All right. Well, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. It's good to see you all here in person. I do have a short presentation that covers the airport improvement program. I did want to preface it to say that the AIP program and grants for the various airport projects that we're going to discuss a little bit later is a subset of what the office does. We, as Secretary Jen mentioned earlier, we do have a 5010 inspector who inspects all our airports. We do have a construction technician who is our representative on those airport projects to verify that things are going well. All the projects that you'll see, the airports have consultants, and the consultants, of course, do all the engineering work, the bidding, plans, designs, all that type of thing. And they have representatives on the airports, and of course, the state has a share in that as well. So we've got our airport inspector, our 5010 inspector. So the AIP program is a part of that, and this is what I'm wanting to cover here.
Go there.
Oh, I need to do this one.
Yeah.
I have 2 keyboards. All right. So this is just a little bit of history. This goes back to 2020. Over the past few years, we've had quite a number of federal programs that have come up. 2020 was what was called the CARES program. 2021, we had CARISA. ARPA was also in 2021. And each one of these programs is helpful in that it provided sponsors money to do projects. They probably were able to reach projects that they wouldn't have been able to till later. So we were able to pull some projects forward because of the additional money. The downside of that is every time another program comes out, it means there's different rules, a different match rate. It causes headaches for everybody involved when we're managing these grants. The last bullet there talks about the bipartisan infrastructure law bill, AIG, is airport infrastructure grants. The term bill later became referred to as Infrastructure Investment in Jobs Act, or IJA. We just pronounce it as IJA. So you may see it bill, you may see it IJA, IIJA. It's basically the same thing. The grant amounts there are what we've had over the previous years. 25, I actually need to update that. It was actually 24.2 million is what we received in bill for that year.
John, before you move on from that, remind the commission what the match rates were for all of those. I know some of them were 100% federal complete.
That's right. For quite a few years past, the federal rate was 90%. And there was a 5% state match, 5% local. And, you know, I mentioned the match rates change depending on the program. So the 22 and 23, now I'll have to actually go back and try and remember what these were. For quite a while, it was 90%. It did go to 95% federal with a 2.5% share and 2.5% local share. And looking at CARES and CRISA, now some of those were 100% federal. And that recent history gets all jumbled in my mind now because we had so many different programs. Right now, in this year 26, we are still in a 95% federal, 2.5. And it looks as though that may change back again in 27 moving forward.
Mr. Chair, if I could interrupt, so the state match decided by you guys as commissioners. The federal is set, but you know, you're the ones that are deciding what the state's gonna be versus what the local match is gonna be provided for that remaining gap that needs to be filled from the FAA.
Just a brief look at what is eligible, and I don't want to read all of this. These are in the slides, and you've received these slides, so for time I don't read all of it. But just real briefly, anything that's going to enhance the airport, typically what you pilots think an airport needs. You need pavements, you need runway, taxiway, aprons, you need to have weather reporting, if the traffic volume and use of the airport is eligible for that. Those are things that the AIP funds are for. Now there is an AIP handbook that is a federal document that is very specific in what it defines as being eligible. And we'll go into a little bit of those details just in the next slide. Projects related to revenue producing may be eligible at non-primary airports if the airport already satisfactorily addressed all airside needs and improvements. And what that means is if an airport has needs regarding those things I talked about, pavements are in good shape, safety areas are in good shape, then they are eligible to have a revenue producing project such as fuel system, hangar, those types of things. But they have to meet those primary needs first of all before they are able to reach that revenue producing project. Projects related to airport operations not eligible, things like salaries, equipment, supplies. And this is a little bit further of a breakdown. Eligible projects on the left side are all the things we talked about: pavements, lighting, signage, drainage, safety aspects of it. We've got nav aids, reels, PAPIs, planning studies also. The FAA requires a lot of planning going into a project, and so all those planning, environmental needs must be met. Airport layout plans, master plans, those types of things. Ineligible projects, sort of what we discussed on the previous slides. Maintenance projects and vehicles really are not eligible. General operation expenses are not eligible. Marketing plans, training, those types of things. I would also point out things that are for use by the general public are going to be eligible. If it's a private business, an FBO, something like that, those are going to have to be funded aside from the federal funding.
John, your asterisk was important. You want to grab that?
Asterisk, private fuel farms, private aircraft hangars. These are some things that need to be funded separately. The asterisks, revenue projects for sponsors are AIP eligible but receive no state match. So we're talking about things that the sponsor would develop and place on the airport. So if the airport sponsor, who is the city or the county, they want to build a revenue producing project, those are AIP eligible. In some years ago, I forget which year it was, but this commission had made the decision not to participate in those revenue producing projects. So just in those projects, the sponsor, let's just say it's a 90% federal, the sponsor would be responsible for 10% because the state's not gonna participate. So that is a commission decision.
So if you guys decide you wanna change that, that's your full realm of authority.
Thanks for pointing that out.
That funding policy was last changed in July of 2023.
And that's when funds were really looking not good.
And that's when you guys were at like 8.3 too, wasn't it? Or 7.5? 2.5?
That was before we had funds returned back to the aeronautics fund. So these are a few considerations on airport projects. Airport sponsorship requirements have been met. The airport has to own the property that they're on. The project has to be consistent with their airport layout plan and their master plan. Those are things that receive federal and state funding, so any project that they would hope to do needs to fall within those parameters. Sufficient funds available, the project can be completed without undue delay. Many projects have timelines, well, all projects have timelines associated with them, but there are different timelines. If project plans and specs are produced, they need to be constructed within a certain period of time. If environmental plans and surveys are done, projects need to be carried out within a certain period of time. Grants can be only more than $25,000 for AIP, and there needs to be, as I said, laid out on their current airport layout plan.
John, does all of our new commissioners, do you know what NIPIAS is? That one acronym he had up there, NPIAS?
So very quickly, NIPIAS, so the airport must be included in the NIPIAS. So the NIPIAS is the National Plans of Integrated Airport System. That is an FAA report that they update every other year, I believe, every 2 years. It defines the various categories of airports. So the airport needs to be included in the NIPIAS. Within South Dakota, we have 56 NIPIAS airports. The airports, and just to make the distinction, the NIPIAS airports are going to receive federal funding. They're eligible to receive federal funding so they can get a grant. The airports that are not NIPIAS, we consider basic service. In South Dakota, they're all the airports that have only turf runways. You know, a lot of our NIPIAS airports do have turf crosswind runways, but just the way it is in South Dakota, the federally funded airports have hard surface runways. The ones that are non-NIPIAS have only turf, or possibly gravel, but
Thanks, John.
that is the distinction. Thanks for pointing that out. If you see any other terminology here, stop me.
It's an FAA program. There's
Yes,
acronyms.
yes, it is. And the way we see it is if it's NIPIAS, it receives grants. If it's non-NIPIAS, they can't get grants, federal grants. So there are different flavors of federal funding, even within AIP. Within the Airport Improvement Program, there are 3 separate categories of funding. And looking at the pie chart there, that's on the left side of the chart, when we're looking at entitlements, this is showing that there is 90% federal, so that would be the blue, the purple, the green, and it shows them that they're roughly a third of that 90%, with the remainder being 5% local and 5% state. And again, those are for the years where we had 90% federal. It's a little bit misleading because there there's probably never a time when a federal grant is gonna have exactly 1/3 discretionary, 1/3 state apportionment, and 1/3 federal. This is just so you can see that all those types of funding might be in the grant. And entitlement funds are going to be used, let me just back up a little bit. The entitlement funds are federal funds distributed to individual airports. So primary airports are gonna be those Part 139 airports, commercial airports with more than 100,000 enplanements per year. So our 5 commercial airports, they receive a lot more funding than the remainder of the general aviation airports we have. So right now, if you're a GA airport, you receive $150,000 in entitlements per year. If you're Pierre, Aberdeen, Watertown, Rapid City, or Sioux Falls, you're gonna get quite a bit more, anywhere from 1 million to 2 million to, to 4 or 5 million. And there can be a lot of other categories piled on top of that, excuse me, because the 139s are gonna be eligible for additional services. They're commercial airports, they've got cargo aprons, they have lots of different aspects of aviation on the airport. So you see that on the lower half there. The general aviation airport's gonna receive $150,000 per year. That money is good for 4 years. In most, I shouldn't say most, there's no such thing as a normal year anymore. But many years, when the rules apply, you could multi-year those entitlements, which means you could get a grant for a project, and let's say you have your full allotment of entitlements, so you've got $600,000 of entitlements. You could spend that money this year. If it's multi-year, you could borrow next year's money and apply that when the time comes. So it's sort of like, borrowing from next year's entitlements. We're not quite sure this year whether we're gonna be able to multi-year, and we'll talk about the program in a little bit. The entitlements can be transferred to other eligible airports. If that project meets all the requirements that we've been talking about, and let's say that there's additional entitlements that won't be spent, and they might be expiring this year, they can actually be transferred to another airport that meets all the eligibility requirements. And if you have questions later, we can definitely get into more detail with this. I'd like to go into the other types of funding. This is the entitlement funding. State apportionment funding is another aspect of that AIP funding. So when an airport gets an AIP grant and it's 90% of the total project cost, the entitlements and the state apportionment can be part of that 90% federal, okay? So these are funds that are apportioned to each state to be used for projects that are a high priority for the state. They're not allowed for terminal buildings, revenue producing facilities, or parking lots. They can be used to supplement projects that you just can't reach with entitlements alone. So we work very closely with the FAA ADO office, the airport's district office up in Bismarck. And together, we look at the list of airports, we look at the requests for funding. If they've got a large project they can't reach with their entitlements, we try to help them out with state apportionment. So it is a little bit, again, misleading. It says state apportionment, but it is federal money as part of the AIP program. And then we reach, let's see, did I skip one? Okay, entitlement. Okay, so there's not a slide here for discretionary. That federal discretionary funding is something that usually comes a little bit later in the program. It's discretionary funds that's competitive at a national level. So large airports with large projects are gonna request discretionary funding. And that's usually something that has to be on the FAA's radar 3 to 4 years ahead of time. So that's a project that has to be laid out quite a bit ahead of time, and again, it is very competitive. So it's, you know, it's possible that an airport's not gonna get that, and they're gonna have to scope the project to do part this year, part next year, something along those lines, if they can't reach their total project goal. Now, in this particular slide, state funding, that's what comes out of the aeronautics fund. This is what we match with. This is showing 5%. Well, this year was 95% federal. Our state match is 2.5%. So that is, you know, right now it's even with what the local contributes for their match. So I want to talk about the capital improvement plan a little bit, the schedule. There are various parts of this that you're going to see and you're going to be asked to review and comment on. CIP planning is sort of going on all year round. You know, this is showing a calendar, and all the stakeholders meet with each airport multiple times throughout the year. South Dakota is a pretty small state regarding the aviation community, regarding airports, airport users, pilots, that type of thing. So we get together numerous times throughout the year. If you see on, see the mouse up there. So right here, this is an annual process where the state meets with sponsors, the consultants, and the FAA to discuss the upcoming projects, the immediately upcoming project as well as the future projects. And the timeline here says summer, fall, but really it's starting right now, actually. We have CIP sponsor meetings at the April conference, or I should say the day prior to the April conference here at Pier, and we'll have more information on that as well. So CIP meetings are going to happen April, May, and sort of throughout the summer. There's a lot of planning activities that happen leading up to what's called the project pre-application. This is December. The FAA has moved that schedule up. It's actually in October now. It has to be to the state and the ADO office by the beginning of October. So that means that the CIP is complete and updated. The pre-application requirements might mean that surveys have to be completed. There has to be wetland delineations that have been identified, environmental surveys that are done, some pre-surveying work that needs to be done leading up to the project. All these things have to be identified in time for the pre-application. The pre-application basically gets the project, the upcoming year's project, on the FAA's radar, so they know what's coming. At this point, so that comes to us in October, that gives us a couple of months, October, November, December, to assemble all of these CIPs. I mentioned there's 56 airports that are eligible for grants. All those CIPs come into the state. We combine it into one big CIP, and that gets put together, and I actually have the 2026 program here for you after this presentation, as well as 27 through 29 projects that are coming up, and that is a result of the pre-applications that were collected back in October. The statewide CIP provided to the Commission for review between February and May. That's when you've had a chance to look at these airport projects. If you have questions, there's always more information that can be provided. There are a lot of details in this, so it's not something that could be given out in a handout, because applications oftentimes at 50, 60, 70 pages. There's lots of detail in them. Bid letting, June, July. Now, these are general, I said there's no normal year. We'd say that at one time we thought there might be a normal year where we can lay out a calendar like this. Every year seems to be a little bit different. Bid letting held in June, July. Maybe we might be able to have some in May, but June, July is still pretty much the target date. After bid lettings, the grant applications are submitted based on bids for the most part. The FAA wants to see prices that are gonna be based on bid prices. Some of these costs for these projects may change with respect to what we saw on the CIP or on the pre-application. When federal funding becomes available and all the prerequisite work and documents are completed, the applications are submitted, and grant offers will come out. And here again, June, July timeframe. We will still continue to see grant applications and grant offers come out into August and maybe even early September. And the larger projects that are requesting discretionary funds, those are gonna be the later ones in the year, because as I mentioned, they're competed for nationally, and so those funds have to be pulled together and distributed, throughout the nation and throughout the various FAA regions. So they will come out later in the year. A lot of times those larger projects, they may receive the grant and get funding, but that entire project, there's not gonna be enough summer left to do the project. They might be able to purchase materials, stockpile materials, and then start in on construction the following spring. And pre-construction meetings will start up. We're pretty busy going around to pre-construction meetings, pop in and do some, quality control assessments on those projects throughout the summer. All those construction activities happen throughout the summer. And towards the end of the summer, depending on the size of the project, those projects will get closed out. Many times, it won't be till the next spring those projects get closed out, and that is a large activity by itself. And you might see on some projects that there are some costs associated with the closeout just because of the amount of effort. It's an FAA requirement that has to be done. And documentation, after an airport is updated, it has a new taxiway, new apron, something like that, the drawings have to be updated, all those activities happen afterwards. Any questions on the calendar schedule? So, in 2024, we had 51 grants, and that was a mix of AIP and bill grants. And this was a total federal grant program of $53.8 million. In 2025, I'm sorry, 2025, we had 70 grants. So we jumped from 51 grants, which seemed like a lot, to 70 grants. And the total federal grants was 63.4 million in 25. And this is just a quick comparison of programs over the years. And just the note there talks about the pre-applications having to be in by October. So non-hub airports is pretty much everything except for Sioux Falls. The AIP and the bill match, as this is showing in 25, 26, 95%. So that's pretty much the AIP program. I did have just a few other slides here on some airport information, and some of that comes out of our state aviation system plan. And that plan is available on our website, and we have copies of it if you're interested in that. The FAA expects state entities to do this every 10 years or so. We did a state aviation system plan in 2010. The last one we did was 2020. We're halfway through that state aviation system plan now. But it looks at all of our airports as a system. And so there were some results that came out of that, and I just wanted to touch on that really briefly. Land use planning and zoning for airports, that is a part of the airport layout plan, and the master plan is land use planning. And we do meet with our airport sponsors about this, so they can keep this at the forefront and keep it, I guess, keep this topic moving, so they're always moving towards some improvement on this. Land use control is intended to assure that incompatible land uses are not placed in locations that would impede the development of the airport. That's why the planning is so important. We don't want a structure to be allowed to be placed somewhere where they thought it's not inhibiting the airport, only to find that airport had a new approach going in, or a runway extension, or something along those lines. We want to keep the airport free for development, and that's what is shown on their master planning and airport layout plan. Land use control involves the airport owner and surrounding jurisdictions, and just some documents here that are useful in land use planning. And height restrictions, that's one of these topics where we do get into zoning on this, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. You may or may not have seen these before, the Part 77 airspace around the airport. Every public use airport has a Part 77 surface. This is depicted on their airport layout plan. Airports need to be protected, and in South Dakota it's generally going to be height zoning. For the most part, noise zoning, I don't think we have that around at all, so it's going to be height zoning. We want to make sure that airports understand the importance of their airspace. It needs to be protected because the FAA won't, if a structure is built and it impedes an airport, the FAA is not necessarily going to be the one that's going to stop the construction. What they'll do is they'll increase the minimums or cause an approach to be not applicable, and we don't want anybody's approach to be, the nomenclature NA on the approach plane. We don't want that to happen. So we really try to impress on the airport sponsor the need to be looking at their Part 77 surfaces, as well as their design surfaces too. On airport and off airport, Part 77 stipulates that any item that penetrates 100-to-1 surface from the nearest runway or is 200 feet above ground level, there needs to be an airspace study that's done. And anybody in the surrounding area that wants to build hangars, houses, towers, grain bins, all of those need to be airspaced or submitted for airspace study. And there is the notice criteria tool on the OEAAA website. And that is another thing that our office does, is it files the airspace studies when necessary. This is just a real quick look at the notice criteria tool. It actually looks a little bit different now. The FAA has updated their website just a few months ago. But there is a procedure. Anybody can get into this website and use the notice criteria tool, and this will tell them whether their proposed structure is or is not going to impact in airspace around the airport. And very, very quick look at the OEAAA process. I'm not going to go into detail on that. Airport zoning, this is something that came out of the State Aviation System Plan. 32 out of 51 airports didn't have zoning. And that is a problem for us. It's a little bit more prevalent West River because some counties just flat out do not have zoning. Some places don't even, there are jurisdictions that don't offer building permits. And it makes it real difficult for us to do this. I've learned a lot about zoning just in the last 3-4 years, and there are some real conflicts when we get into this, and I'll talk about this in another couple slides here. Chapter 50 includes a section on zoning, and a few years ago, the Aeronautics Commission has renewed the efforts to make sure that airport sponsors try to move forward with zoning and have some form of zoning. There are various things that they can do. So if an airport sponsor doesn't have zoning personnel on staff, they can hire a consultant to do this. And we've contacted all the airports regarding this. The airports realize that this is something that we're trying to do. And we've had several meetings with the planning districts. There are multiple planning districts around the state, with some of the aviation consultants, and we plan to do another couple of meetings coming up. And we're actually going to try to hammer out some of these problems that we have. We're going to try to get DOT legal involved too, because they're really our experts in that type of thing. And so moving forward with this kind of meeting is going to try to help us understand a little bit more clearly the challenges that exist for zoning, especially for particular airports. This is just a quick look of what an ordinance might look like. Part 77 has very specific descriptions on their various airspace surfaces. And a graphic can actually be used from an airport layout plan that depicts the Part 77 airspace around an airport. And each one of those airspace surfaces can be labeled and called out in the text of the ordinance. So for the most part, this information exists for most airports. It's just really a question of verifying what exists there, verifying the Part 77 surfaces and getting language into the ordinance there and making sure it gets enacted. Another thing that was identified in the state aviation system plan was that airports have an airport emergency plan. For the Part 139s, this is already there. This is mandatory for them. For everybody else, we are encouraging them to do airport emergency planning. Quite a number of the large GAs have some form of airport emergency plan. It doesn't have to be, the Part 139s probably have a 20 or 30 page plan. The smaller airports don't need that. It can expand and contract as needed. So smaller airports really need a contact list of public safety people. They need to get together with, possibly their county emergency managers and do exercises so that responders are able to, get through the gate or have access to those parts of the airport they need to. So this is also in various stages of completion. And the challenge here is sort of the same challenge as with airport zoning. Many of these sponsors just don't have the staff to do it. The airport manager might be a finance officer, and finance officers have a lot on their plate already. So it's a challenge to get any movement on this, even when they know that even when they know it's something that is going to benefit the airport. It's difficult to do just because there's, just not the bodies to do it.
John, could I?
Sure.
So is this it's recommended based on the state plan, so it's not a mandate?
It's not a mandate.
Of those that have done it, are they physically available public-wise, or?
For the most part, they're on the city websites, the city and county websites, and that's not true for everywhere, but a lot of places they are public documents. And I do share those documents as cities are able to accomplish them. I will get copies and share them as examples.
Curious, do the commercial airports in the state have these done?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. This is a Part 139 requirement for commercial. But for the smaller ones, no, it's not a mandate, but it is a good idea to do. So we do try to emphasize that as we meet with airports, and it's been an ongoing endeavor to do this. We do have airport directories that were just published, and showing here was the last airport directory. In 2026, I've got a stack of them on the table there if you'd like to grab one or two of them. This is something that it was a 2-year directory. It's become a 3-year directory, so every 3 years we update them. And we get very good participation from airports and airport consultants to update the information in these directories. And we ask for help because we notice a mistake or two right after it gets published. There's maybe a decimal missing or a numeral that's transposed or something like that. So we maintain a PDF copy on the website, and if you see anything wrong with it, definitely let us know, and we'll keep our PDF updated, and we have changes noted for the next edition. Airport conference, April 7th is when we have CIP meetings right here in the commission room. April 8th is when we have the airport conference at the Ramcota and Pier. And that's all of our contacts. So that's the presentation. It's a lot of information in kind of a short amount of time, but as I mentioned, you know, we're always available to answer questions. If you have questions about specific airports or projects or you know, AIP questions, something like that, we'd be happy to answer them.
I was gonna say, gentlemen, as John was going through the various, you know, CIP, the NIPIAS, and all of the funding, I've been on the commission for over 7 years, and to be honest with you, the NIPIAS, I was trying to think, okay, what's NIPIAS? So it wasn't just for you guys, it was for all, it's, Robert's Rules of Borders are more or less complicated than keeping some of that going. I was going to mention, where John was talking about the structures and the airspace, do you guys get the determinations when, like, the FAA says that, yeah, we're gonna improve this tower, or, do you guys get those at, like, your airport, and do you ever respond to them? I was gonna say, do you wanna address when we can say that, you know, if we're gonna send a written response, we're South Dakota Aeronautics Commissioner as opposed to just Bob Huggins?
Carla, speak to that.
Mr. Chairman, so if you're gonna speak on behalf of the commission, or in your official capacity as a commissioner, that really needs to run through the commission. You can always speak as a private person, you're always free to do that. But if there was, a particular item that you wanted commission authority to speak on, it needs to be an agenda item
And then you
considered by the commission.
take action and assign, Dustin's going to speak on behalf of the commission for the specific item.
Do you have a question?
Can I, if there's a breach of the Part 77 airspace as an airport manager, can I address that outside of the commission?
As an airport manager?
Yes,
And what, we had talked about this several meetings ago, unfortunately, quite often they'll get the notice, and we aren't going to have enough time to have a meeting to discuss it. If we do, we'll discuss it, and if I think it's something that we need to come as a commission, I will present it at a meeting, you know, and we can vote on it. I won't just say that, okay, yeah, we're gonna do this, here's what I'm putting out, we will vote on it, but unfortunately, quite often, the reply deadline doesn't allow us to have a meeting.
and Mr. Chairman, it'll need to be an agenda item.
Right,
To have it
right.
listed on the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, that being said, you can always call a special commission meeting if you want.
Yeah.
So you don't have to wait for your normal regular schedule on the critical report.
And we get paid for this, right? Just making sure.
And you have 72 hours to post the agenda, especially on
Okay.
special meetings.
Thank you, Gary. You guys did such a good job keeping me out of jail. Okay, so that was, went through there, so, we're going over attachment, 4 or anything on this, or?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I do have the last part of the agenda, which is attachment 4. So the first page lists the 2026 airport projects, and this list is proposed projects for 2026. And as I mentioned, pre-applications were received in October. The FAA staff will go through these and ensure that all of the necessary requirements are met. And so if there's land needing to be purchased prior to a design project, for example, there needs to be a purchase order in hand. And if that doesn't happen by a certain date, that design project is not gonna happen. And so we'll see projects drop off the list for one reason or another because of things like that. So this is the proposed list of projects for 2026. And the projects after that come from the airport CIPs 27, 28, and 29. And of course, the further off we get into the future, the more change may happen before we get to those projects. So this is an informational item, so there's no action required on this, but this list is for your review. We expect to have grant applications, May 1st is the deadline for AIP grant applications, and grant offers should be coming, shortly after that. So you actually see grant application requests coming for state match at that time.
Just glancing through, there's a lot to look at for 2026. Does anybody, where are our airport cameras? Does anybody put in for any of that yet?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this year we expect to have 5 airport cameras installed at 5 different airports. My list is over here, if I can go, I think I brought that list with me. Let's see. If I can't find my list, I'm not gonna name them because I don't remember them. So, in the last year, we actually have 2 airports that have aviation cameras that are operational, and that's Sturgis and Spearfish. So we've had requests from a number of different airports, and in talking with the vendor for the aviation weather cameras, he felt capable of installing 5 sites within South Dakota. So there would be 5 airports that would get aviation weather cameras. I do have requests from some others that will be pushed to 2027.
Okay, so the 5 it's 5 this year. It's
This
not
year,
total that-
2026, we should have 5 more airports operational by the end of the summer, or I should say the end of the fall. I'm not sure how far it'll
Has
go
anybody
into.
canceled their request to count of having to help fund it?
No.
Good.
So, Mr. Chairman, going back to the 2026 airport project listing, what we've done in the past is for you guys to look over this list, and if there's an airport that you feel you'd like to have more input or discussion or whatever else, you'll pump those out at the next meeting and get that to John, and then he can kind of go through that and be prepared to answer those questions. $134 million, definitely overinflated, especially with the $50 million from the CDSs for Sioux Falls and Rapid City, so that's reasons why that's a little higher than what John just presented relative to the past years on that. And again, that doesn't mean all of these are gonna get funded, and I guess we'll wait and see what happens with FAA here, and hopefully not too distant future as far as making decisions.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
So, let's see, we're going through the agenda. Okay, so we're good with that, so I guess we're down to, do we have any other public input on the phone or around? Anybody? Bueller? And if you're trying to talk, make sure you're not on mute. I guess we're good.
Just one other thing, we do this with the Transportation Commission, and when we're not looked up with, agenda items, but ask for any informational item that you guys would like us to do presentations like John just did, if there's something that you would like to have more discussion, more from an informational, that whether it's the staff and things, I think those are very helpful from an educational standpoint, so I'll throw that in your guys' bailiwick here for the next meeting, and if there is something, just let us know so we can get our presentation and data and everything else ready to go, so.
Did you have something?
I did just have a question.
Yes, sir.
Some of us fly in, to get from the airport here, are we able to use state vehicles if they're at the state facility, or is that, are we tied to the state enough to do that, or do we just call a taxi or what?
You know, I think if that's something that we can maybe work with staff to come pick you guys up, as opposed to leaving a state vehicle out there, and that would work. We can try to arrange that. We've got a few out back that we could, John's and Rock shaking their heads yes, so.
We just commandeered the crew car to get here.
That's what everybody has.
John Hauk is typically giving them the crew car when Odenbach came up, cause Odenbach asked me one time to call Joe, to call Ron before I did.
Either way, yeah, we can just arrange it.
Sounds like they have a couple too, so.
Can
Did they
figure
give you
that
some
out.
room in the state hangar too? No, they didn't.
I don't think you can get in the state hangar. After flying. Other than that, Mr. Chairman, I was anticipating we would have one more individual that wanted to provide public input, but I'm assuming they're tied up and weren't able to make it.
Okay, well, nothing else from anybody? Let's be
Next
adjourned.
meeting is March 19th.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the South Dakota Network, a service of SDPB. Download the SDNet app to your mobile device and listen wherever you are.
Thank you.